What's up? Today, I'm going to get you guys started on DJing with USBs. So I did a video a while back showing everyone how you can export your first USB on Rekordbox, and that got some really good reception. And I feel like I should just do a full series kind of walking you guys through each section of the mixer and kind of how it's different, what's important when it comes to DJing on USBs. So I kind of just want to cut like straight through all the BS and just give you guys exactly what you need to be successful when you're DJing with USBs. Like I said, I'll explain everything to you guys, but some parts of mixers, they don't get used that much, and there's a reason for that, because unless you're in a DMC, it doesn't make any sense for you to do it. But the first section that I want to go over today is display and settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bounce over here to the mixer, and I'm going to show you guys my display screen that I have on the XDJ XZ, and I'm going to run you guys through kind of what's important, what's not, what the general layout is, all that jazz. Okay, so what you guys can see on my super high quality iPhone video that I'm shooting is the display screen in front of me. This is a crate that I used a couple weeks back DJing at a venue in Richmond. There was a lot of like house, pop, that sort of stuff. But when you pop your USB in, you are going to get something like this that comes up. So obviously you have either USB 1 or 2. Mine is in USB 2. So when you first click on it and it's loading, that is the screen that will pop up for you. Now I have all of my crates in here that I've exported onto this USB, and when you pop on to browse, that's what's gonna come up, is all the playlist keys, history, search. Basically using this jog wheel here, you can pretty much go through and look at all of your recordings, any other folders you have. This is your search feature right here, so you can type in anything you're looking for. But if we're talking about things that we're actually using on this mixer, I am pretty much only using the playlist section and the search section. And that pretty much wraps it up for the browse section. Next, you have your tag list section. So you can actually tag tracks, and then you can go back into your tag list section. And then once you bounce back into your tag list section, like let's say you highlighted a song or something like that, and you want to come back to it later and you want to be fast about it, if you tag it and then go back to your tag list, it'll be right there for you when you're going back and DJing. So I'll give you an example here. So let's pop into this crate over here. Let's say Giant, right? So in this top right section here, it says tag track. So right there, I just tagged it. And then let's say I'm DJing, and I want to go back. You hit tag list, everything you have tagged is going to come up right in that section for you whenever you're DJing. But when it comes to actually going through and DJing, I use this every once in a while. Like if I'm skipping over something that like maybe I want to save for like a prime time section that I would have in my warm-up section, this is a good time to use it, to tag a track and then go back and use it later. Info, pretty self-explanatory. If you click info over any track, it'll pop up. It'll give you the key. If you have it, it'll give you, what genre it is, the time, all that jazz. I'm only using info to check if a track's too long and I don't know if it's clean or dirty or not. That's pretty much the only time I'm using it. Is if the track's too long and I can't see the whole end of it, so I can't tell if it's clean or dirty. That's the only time I'm really using info, is if I'm just making sure I have the right version of the track. Another thing with this top section here, this is where we kind of start to get into taste and personal preference. Now, if you just hit the regular menu button, it'll kind of like bounce you back to stuff. But if you hold menu, it pulls up your settings or the utility section. This is something you should definitely check before you start DJing, especially if you're using this mixer, any sort of like XDJ type of mixer, as well as like CDJs. It's important to check all of your settings, whether you want to, if you want to check the firmware, you can check the firmware, but I'm just typically focusing on the settings that I'm about to go over here. First thing first, load lock. I'm usually keeping load lock on because I don't accidentally want to load a track onto the wrong track that is currently playing a track, and then the song abruptly ends and then a new one starts, because that's really awkward. Needle lock is something that I also keep locked. That is essentially the moving search feature here. So if you're playing a track, I'm playing it, if I accidentally put my hand on the screen wrong here, it won't jump the track around, which is really nice. So I'm usually keeping everything locked. The load lock and the needle lock is always on. Quantized beat value, I usually keep it on 1 beat. Hot cue color, if you want to have fancy little colors for stuff, you can do that. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. I don't know why. Very indecisive. Auto cue level, I never touch that. Slip flash, I never touch that. On-air display, I never touch that. Jog display mode, I'd never touch that because it's just the default one. So I don't want like artwork to show or anything specific like that. I just keep it at auto. Jog ring brightness. So what that means is that we'll adjust the brightness of your jog wheels. I usually keep that on 2 pretty much at all times. 1 isn't that bright. Off doesn't really make a difference. Off, you won't be able to get the displays that you want to let you know like, hey, a song is ending. You need to change this shit. So I usually just keep that on 2. Jog ring indicator on. Keep that on pretty much the whole time. Vinyl speed adjust. I usually keep that on touch. Auto play mode, I keep that off because when I have a song end, I don't randomly want it to play another track once that track runs out on that deck. Because let's say I accidentally fader 1 up as I transition into fader 2 towards the end of the song, and I forget to put the fader down on fader 1, then you're going to have 2 tracks going over top of each other, and it's going to be a little bit of a train wreck. So I keep autoplay off. So for the XDJ stuff, all the equalizers, the curves, things of that nature, all of that stuff falls under this utility menu. When you're getting into the like CDJs and like the Nexus models, stuff like that, sometimes those those mixers have these utility settings kind of built in on them already. So equalizer curve, if you want a harsher equalizer, you can use something called isolator. So that really, if you try to scoop out the low end, like it'll scoop out all of the low end if you put it on isolator. A lot of people like to use isolator. I just have it on equalizer for right now because I don't really see the need for isolator. Sometimes I feel like it could be a little too harsh, but I totally understand why people do use isolator. Channel fader curve, I usually use curve 2, but here you can adjust your different curve settings if you would like to. Like I said, usually what I'm doing here is I'm adjusting some of these. I'm pretty much adjusting each one of these. Crossfader curve, I'm usually keeping the curve this way. You can set it to like a really harsh curve if you want, but the default one is 2 if I'm not mistaken. Master equalizer, I leave it on this setting. I never touch any of these with the 0 dB. Peak limiter, I always keep that on. Mic out to booth, keep that on. Talk over level advanced. All of these settings on the bottom here, I'm pretty much leaving on. Mixer MIDI message, you definitely want to keep that on send, especially if you are using Serato on any of these mixers, because MIDI messaging is how you're able to map your pads or different parts of the mixers to certain things that you want to activate on your laptop. So it's very important that if you're DJing on a laptop that you leave mixer MIDI message on. General settings here, language. I don't need to adjust it because it's in English, but plenty of language settings if you want to adjust them. Pad and button brightness and LCD brightness and jog LCD brightness are definitely stuff that I use a lot when I'm DJing. A good example of this is, let's say you're DJing outdoors in June or July and the sun is blaring down on your mixer and you can't see anything. And you know, sometimes people put those like cardboard screens over stuff because they can't see anything because the sun is just going down on it. A lot of times those people don't adjust their brightness. Now, sometimes, if the sun's like right on it, there's nothing you can do. But if, there's a little bit of that, you can typically adjust the brightness on here, and then that will help you a lot when you're DJing. So the pad button brightness is on 4 for me. I don't really see the need to put it down anywhere. It really doesn't make that much of a difference, to be quite frank. LCD brightness does make a pretty good difference. You can see here as I'm adjusting it, the screen is going like on and off, on and off. So it goes on a scale from 1 to 5. I noticed a big difference, like from the default 3 to 5, especially when I'm outdoors DJing. It makes a huge difference. Other than that, if you think the touch display is a little off, you can do some like touchscreen calibration. So you pretty much just touch the little dots, arrows, and then that will help you to recalibrate the touchscreen, which is really nice. Auto standby, leave that on, and then this is the version that this is currently on, is 1.24. But as you can see, I use some general some of the mixer, and nothing really on this first section here. So a majority of my editing comes in the preferences section of the mixer and the general settings. Another thing I forgot to mention too is these lines. You can activate different sections just by holding it down. So how it just says regular menu there, just allows you to bounce around. But that line, if I hold it, that is what allows me to activate the utility or the settings menu. The same thing actually applies to the browse, which is really nice. So if you're kind of in a pinch and you want to keep it moving, if you hold down browse, it automatically will send you to your search screen, which is really nice. It's a really great shortcut. It's a habit that I didn't develop, but I hope you develop, because it is extremely inconvenient that I'm bouncing back and forth all the time when I should just hold down browse and jump to the search screen. Other things, obviously, your load decks here, 1 and 2. You can just load it to 1 or 2, or you can scroll down and then just use the jog wheel to select which one you want it to go to. But I usually will just hover over it, then I'll click 1 or 2 to send it to whatever deck I want to send it to. Another thing that's really cool about these mixers is the shortcut button here in the bottom right. This is something that I use every once in a while too. It is a shorter version of the utility menu, to be honest. So it helps you jump around to things quickly, as well as you can change waveforms, quantize values, your load lock, those sorts of things. Those kind of really essential settings you can adjust here, which is nice. So if I want to change my waveform to RGB, you can see there, it just changed it to an RGB waveform, but I will change it back to blue for now. For the shortcut feature, you can also bounce to your playlist really quick. You can go to your search feature really quick. There's a lot of different ways to get to a lot of different places. I'm not really doing any editing or like track filtering, to be honest, with this bottom left button. So I kind of stay away from that. There is your deck quantize button. I don't really use quantize that much, to be honest, because it can really start to mess with your cue points and some of the ways like you're mixing. Like it can, if your grids aren't set, it can really fuck things up. I tend to keep that off. And then if you tap the time mode here, instead of holding it down, it will adjust whether it shows the like remaining or how far the track is currently progressing. I like to keep it on remaining just so it kind of acts as like a countdown. So you can see how much time you're running out on, instead of just relying on the LED screens that come with like the CDJs or XDJ series stuff where it just starts blinking when the track's about to end. It's nice to have a little bit of a further notice. Let's see if I forgot anything. Oh, so I should have mentioned this at the start, but I didn't because I'm an idiot. These other buttons, other than USB 1 and 2, Rekordbox export here, I'd never really used this white button, to be honest, but I do use the link button a good bit too, because if you go into control mode and you're using a laptop, this allows you to connect your laptop to the controller. You can also use the link button, especially if you're on CDJs, or with this model too, if you create a third and fourth deck, you can then use the link button to read USBs on other devices, which is very helpful. All right, that does it for me today. Hopefully you guys learned something new. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, all of that good stuff, and be on the lookout for the next video in the series here where I go a little bit further down the mixer. And I'm gonna show you guys the EQ section, that middle section of the mixer, as well as some of the effects as well. And I'm gonna give you guys the quick rundown on what I'm using, what I'm not using, what is essential, and what is BS. Take it easy, and I'll talk to you soon.